The day he lost his job, his room, and almost the last of his hope, the only thing Daniel Brooks inherited was a hole in the desert that everyone else called useless, until his German shepherd heard the wind breathing behind stone. Daniel sat in his old pickup behind the gas station outside Dry Mesa, Arizona, with the engine off, a half-empty water bottle in the cup holder, and the final paycheck from Saguaro Ridge Lodge folded inside the pocket of his faded field jacket. He was 40 years old, a white veteran with broad shoulders, a weathered face, dark brown hair cut short but no longer kept with military sharpness, and a few silver threads showing near his temples. Under the jacket he wore a blue work shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed brown boots powdered with red dust from the lodge maintenance yard where, that morning, a manager had asked him to sign a safety report Daniel knew was not true. The old mine trail behind the resort had been marked safe for guests, but Daniel had walked it before sunrise and seen the cracked sandstone, the missing warning markers, and the loose ground where rainwater had cut beneath the path. He wrote what he saw. The manager slid the report back and told him to make it less expensive. Daniel placed the pen down and said he could not. Not loudly. Not proudly. Just plainly, the way a man speaks when the truth is the only shelter he has left. By noon, his locker was empty. By late afternoon, the motel owner, who had already waited 2 weeks for rent, told him with real sadness that he could not keep carrying the room. Daniel thanked him, because the man had been kind longer than most would have been. By nightfall, Daniel's world fit inside the cab of his truck: a duffel bag, a folded blanket, a worn toolbox, 2 cans of food, 1 flashlight, and Rex. Rex was a 6-year-old German shepherd with a black and tan coat, alert ears, a strong chest, and calm, intelligent eyes that watched Daniel without pity. That mattered. Pity made a man feel smaller. Rex only looked at him as if he were still the same person he had been before the job ended, before the motel key was returned, before the desert night pressed its cold hands against the windshield. Daniel poured the last clean water into a metal bowl first, waited for Rex to drink, then took one careful sip from what remained. Old habits held him together. Fold the blanket. Check the locks. Park under light. Keep the dog fed before yourself. Do not let hardship turn you careless. He had just leaned his head back against the seat when his phone rang. The name on the screen was Maya Whitaker, attorney at law, Dry Mesa. Daniel almost did not answer. Legal calls rarely brought mercy to men sleeping behind gas stations. But he did. Maya's voice was warm, professional, and careful. Walter Hensley had passed away. Daniel remembered the old man at once, a thin, sun-browned desert recluse whose truck had broken down 2 summers earlier on a service road beyond the dry wash. Daniel had repaired a split hose with tape and wire, driven Walter into town for coolant, then refused the cash the old man tried to give him. Walter had said, "The desert remembers who stops." Daniel had thought it was just an old man's way of saying thank you. Maya told him Walter had left him property. Daniel gave a tired laugh before he could stop himself. "Ma'am, I do not think I know anyone with property worth leaving." There was a pause. "It is not a house," Maya said. "It is a cave on a small parcel outside Dry Mesa. Locals call it Beggar's Mouth." Daniel looked through the windshield at the dark outline of saguaros beyond the gas station lights. "A cave." "Yes." "Does it have water?" "Not officially." "Power?" "No." "A road?" "A rough one." He closed his eyes. He had lost a job for telling the truth and inherited a hole in a cliff. Beside him, Rex lifted his head. At the word cave, the German shepherd's ears rose, and his calm, intelligent eyes turned toward the east, where the red sandstone hills slept under moonlight. Maya continued, "There is a broker who may contact you." Walter refused several offers. He left instructions asking that you visit before making any decision. The next morning, after a cold night broken by truck lights and uneasy sleep, Daniel drove out past the last houses of Dry Mesa. The land opened into red dust, mesquite, cholla cactus, dry wash, and sandstone cliffs glowing under a hard Arizona sun. The cave was smaller than he expected, a dark mouth in the rock beneath a crescent of white mineral stain. A broker named Cliff Mercer waited beside a clean sport utility vehicle, smiling with the quick sympathy of a man who had already guessed Daniel's situation. Cliff said the land was unusable, unsafe for development, too remote for permits, and probably more burden than blessing. He could arrange a quick sale. Enough cash for a motel, maybe a start somewhere else. Daniel stood at the cave entrance with Rex beside him, and almost said yes. Then Rex stepped inside. The air changed at once, cooler, carrying the dry scent of stone, old dust, and something metallic beneath it. Rex did not wander. He walked to the left wall, pressed one ear against the sandstone below the white crescent mark, and stood perfectly still. Then he scratched the wall 3 times. Daniel frowned, stepped closer, and tapped the stone with his knuckles. Behind it came the faintest hollow reply, and with it a thread of air so cool it felt like the cave was breathing from another room. Cliff stopped talking. Rex looked up at Daniel, calm and certain. For the first time in 2 days, Daniel forgot how empty his life had become and listened. The hollow reply behind the sandstone wall was so faint that Daniel wondered if hunger, heat, and 2 nights of fear had made his mind invent it. But Rex did not move. The German shepherd stood beneath the white crescent mineral mark with his black and tan coat brushed by the cool cave's shadow, alert ears lifted, strong chest steady, calm intelligent eyes fixed on Daniel as if waiting for the man to catch up to what the dog already knew. Outside the cave, the Arizona sun burned over red dust and mesquite, turning the dry wash pale and hard. Cliff Mercer stood near the entrance in his clean boots, his broker smile slipping into irritation. "Old caves make noises," he said. "Wind, loose stone, animals, who knows? You do not want to start imagining value where there is only liability." Daniel Brooks looked at the wall, then at the white crescent mark, then at his own hand still resting against the cool sandstone. He was 40 years old, a white veteran with broad shoulders, a weathered face, dark brown hair cut short with a few silver threads near his temples, wearing a faded field jacket over a blue work shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed brown boots powdered with red desert dust. He had slept in his pickup behind a gas station, poured water for Rex before himself, and nearly accepted Cliff's quick sale offer because a motel bed sounded like mercy when a man had nowhere else to go. But the cave had answered him. Not loudly. Not like treasure in a story. More like a breath trapped behind a patient door. Daniel crouched near the base of the wall where Rex had scratched 3 times. A narrow crack ran below the crescent mark, almost hidden by dust and mineral flakes. He brushed it with his fingers and felt cloth. Rex leaned closer, nose working, but did not touch it. Daniel used the tip of his pocket knife gently, not prying stone, only loosening what time had packed around the opening. After a minute, he drew out a small tin box wrapped in oilcloth and tied with a strip of sun-faded canvas. Cliff took 1 step forward. "That could belong to the estate," he said quickly. Daniel looked back at him. "I am the estate now, according to the paper you wanted me to sign away." The words came out calm, but they carried enough truth to make the broker stop. Daniel set the tin box on a flat stone near the cave entrance where daylight could reach it. Inside were a brass crescent token, a photograph, a water-stained map, and a folded note. The photograph showed Walter Hensley Younger, standing beside a group of desert workers, 2 veterans in worn service caps, an elderly woman with a canteen, and several children gathered near the mouth of the same cave. Stacked behind them were metal water tins, canvas rolls, and wooden crates. On the back, in thin handwriting, Walter had written, "The day the heat broke and the cave held." Daniel felt the words move through him in a way he could not explain. He opened the note. "If the dog heard the wind behind stone, do not sell the place that kept us alive. The token belongs where the moon is white. The map will look wrong until morning light touches the second mark." Daniel read it twice while Rex sat beside him, ears turned toward the cave wall. Cliff cleared his throat again, softer now but still pressing. "Mr. Brooks, old men write dramatic things. You are in a difficult position. I can have cash wired by tomorrow if we keep this simple." Daniel looked at the brass crescent token in his palm. It was heavier than it should have been, warm from the sun and worn smooth along one edge, as if many thumbs had held it in fear or gratitude. Simple as what got warning markers taken down at Saguaro Ridge, Daniel said. I am done helping people make things look simple. The broker's jaw tightened. You may regret waiting. Daniel folded the note and placed it back in the box with the photograph and map. I already know what it feels like to regret not having a place to sleep. I do not know yet what it feels like to regret listening. Cliff said nothing for a moment. The desert wind moved through the cave entrance and across the crescent mark, drawing that cool thread of air from behind the wall again. Rex stood and walked deeper into the cave, stopping where the map showed a small half-moon symbol near the floor. Daniel followed with his flashlight. Below the white mineral stain was a shallow recessed slot, curved like the brass token. He did not insert it. Not yet. Walter's note mentioned morning light, and Maya Whitaker had told him to visit before making any decision. Daniel had learned the hard way that truth rush becomes vulnerable to people who know how to twist it. He slipped the token into his jacket pocket and carried the tin box back to the pickup. Cliff watched from beside his sport utility vehicle, no longer smiling. You are making this harder than it needs to be. Daniel opened the passenger door for Rex. Maybe hard is not the same as wrong. He drove back toward Dry Mesa as the sun lowered behind the sandstone cliffs, but he did not return to the gas station. He parked on the small parcel near the cave entrance, where Walter's land met the dry wash and a mesquite tree cast a thin strip of shade. That night, Daniel shared a can of food with Rex, drank carefully from the last water bottle, and slept in the truck with the tin box under his jacket. The desert cooled fast. Stars opened over the red cliffs. From inside the cave came the faintest whisper of moving air, steady and patient, like a secret keeping itself alive until morning. Morning came to the desert not gently but clearly, drawing a pale gold line across the sandstone cliffs and turning the white crescent mineral mark inside the cave from dull chalk to quiet fire. Daniel woke before the sun fully lifted, stiff from sleeping in the pickup, one hand resting over the tin box under his faded field jacket and the other near Rex's shoulder. The German shepherd was already awake, black and tan coat catching the first desert light through the windshield, alert ears forward, strong chest steady, calm intelligent eyes fixed on Beggar's mouth as if he had spent the night listening to the cave breathe. Daniel Brooks opened the truck door and stepped into the cold early air, still a 40-year-old white veteran with broad shoulders, a weathered face, dark brown hair cut short with a few silver threads near his temples, wearing the same blue work shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed brown boots powdered red by the land Walter Hensley had left him. His back ached. His mouth was dry. His stomach reminded him that 2 cans of food and half a bottle of water were not enough for a man and a dog in the Arizona heat. But something in him had steadied overnight. The quick sale papers were still unsigned. Cliff Mercer was gone. The brass crescent token was still in his pocket. The cave was still waiting. Rex jumped down from the passenger seat and walked straight to the entrance, pausing only once to look back, as if asking whether Daniel was ready to listen in daylight. Daniel carried the tin box, the water-stained map, his flashlight, and the brass token inside. The cave air cooled around him at once. Dust lay over the stone floor in a thin red film. The white crescent mark on the wall now caught the sun at a narrow angle, and Daniel understood the note. The map will look wrong until morning light touches the second mark. He unfolded the map against the wall. In the dimness the night before, it had looked like old water damage and wandering lines. Now, with sunlight striking through the cave mouth and landing beneath the crescent, a second symbol appeared on the paper where dried mineral salts had hidden the ink, a small star beside the half-moon, low near the floor. Rex stood directly over the matching place, nose pointed toward the recessed slot Daniel had found but not opened. Daniel crouched. The slot was curved like the token, but beneath it, almost invisible until morning light crossed the stone, was a tiny groove shaped like a line of water. He slid the brass crescent token into place. It fit without force. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the cave gave a soft internal click, followed by the faint scrape of stone shifting behind stone. Rex lifted his ears higher. Daniel placed one hand on the wall and felt cool air push against his palm. A narrow sandstone panel had loosened a few inches along a seam so natural that no casual visitor would ever have seen it. He did not pull it open. His first instinct, the desperate part of him, wanted to rush forward, to claim whatever waited inside before hunger, heat, law, or another man's paperwork could take it away. But Walter's note, Maya's careful voice, and the memory of losing his job for refusing to rush a false report all met in him at once. Truth needed a witness. Truth needed clean hands. Daniel backed away from the wall, leaving the token in place but the panel unopened. Rex looked up at him, calm, intelligent eyes holding no impatience. "You knew I needed to stop," Daniel said softly. The dog gave one slow breath. Daniel stepped back into the light and called Maya Whitaker. She answered quickly, as if she had been waiting near her phone. He told her about the crescent token, the second mark, the panel, and the air behind the wall. There was a long silence on the line before she spoke. "Mr. Brooks, do not enter until I arrive. Walter's sealed instructions mentioned a hidden chamber, but he never told me where it was. If you found it, the trust condition may be active." Daniel leaned against the warm hood of the pickup and looked toward the cave. "Trust condition? I will explain when I get there," Maya said. "Keep the token in place if the mechanism is stable, but do not disturb anything else. And please drink water if you have it." Daniel almost laughed at the kindness of that last sentence. "There is not much left. Then I will bring some." She arrived 90 minutes later in a dusty white sedan with a case of bottled water, a canvas legal bag, and the focused look of someone walking into a story she had believed only halfway until the desert itself confirmed it. She was in her early 50s, with practical boots, sun-browned hands, and a calm voice that made Daniel understand why Walter had trusted her. She gave him water first. Then she gave Rex a bowl and waited while the dog drank. Only after that did she open her legal bag. "Walter Hensley created a 2-layer estate," she said. "The public transfer left you this parcel and the cave. Most people would sell it quickly. He expected that. The private trust activates only if you visit, refuse immediate sale, find the crescent token, and locate the chamber with a legal witness present." Daniel looked at the cave entrance. "Why me?" Maya's expression softened. "Because you stopped for him once when no one else did. Because he learned you were sleeping in your truck and still taking repair calls for people who could not pay. And because he wrote, very specifically, that your dog would hear the place before you believed you deserved it." Daniel swallowed and looked away toward the red cliffs. Wind moved over the dry wash, carrying the smell of dust, creosote, and warming stone. Together they entered Beggar's Mouth. Rex went first, walking directly to the crescent wall. Maya read aloud from Walter's sealed instruction before Daniel touched the stone. "If Daniel Brooks stands here with Rex and the token has opened the seam, tell him this: the cave was never empty. It was waiting for someone poor enough to understand shelter, honest enough to protect water, and kind enough to share shade. Open the panel. Let the desert remember aloud." Daniel pulled gently. The sandstone panel moved inward on hidden iron pivots, revealing a narrow passage sloping into darkness. Cool air flowed out, scented with cedar crates, old metal canteens, stone dust, and something faintly clean beneath it, like water kept far from the sun. Rex stepped forward without fear. Daniel followed with the flashlight, Maya close behind him. The passage opened into a chamber larger than the cave outside, carved naturally at first, and then reinforced by human hands. Along the walls stood wooden crates, old water tins, folded canvas, ledgers sealed in metal boxes, and a small safe set into a shelf of stone. On the safe door was engraved a crescent moon and one sentence: "For the man who gave water before asking what it was worth." Daniel stood still in the cool dark, the weight of his empty pockets suddenly smaller than the weight of what Walter had kept alive beneath the desert. The chamber behind the sandstone wall held the kind of coolness that felt almost impossible after the hard white heat outside Beggar's Mouth. Daniel stood just beyond the narrow passage with his flashlight pointed toward the safe, while Maya Whitaker remained a step behind him, legal bag pressed against her side, and Rex sat near the stone shelf as if the engraved crescent had been waiting for his shadow. The German shepherd's black and tan coat looked darker in the hidden room, his alert ears sharp in the beam of light, strong chest steady, calm intelligent eyes moving from the old water tins to Daniel's face and back again. Daniel Brooks, 40 years old, a white veteran with broad shoulders, a weathered face, dark brown hair cut short with a few silver threads near his temples, still wore the faded field jacket over his blue work shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed brown boots dusted red from the desert floor. He had slept in his pickup, counted water by mouthfuls, and nearly sold the cave for enough cash to buy a few nights indoors. Now he was standing inside a chamber that had been hidden behind stone for decades, with cedar crates stacked against the walls, sealed metal boxes on shelves, folded canvas rolls tied with rope, old canteens hanging from wooden pegs, and ledgers marked by years in Walter Hensley's careful handwriting. Maya took a slow breath. "I need to read the second instruction before you open anything else." Daniel nodded. His voice had left him for a moment. Maya unfolded a paper from the sealed estate packet and read by flashlight. "Daniel, if you have reached the cool room with Rex beside you, then you did not let fear sell shelter before you knew what it was." Walter's words seemed to travel through the chamber like water under sand. Maya continued. "The desert taught me that people die from heat long before anyone agrees they are in danger. This room was made for those who were not counted fast enough. Open the safe. Let the records show why the cave stayed empty to greedy eyes and full to the ones who needed it." Daniel looked at the safe again. On its door, beneath the crescent moon, the sentence remained clear, "For the man who gave water before asking what it was worth." Maya handed him a folded card with the combination. His fingers were dry and rough around the paper. He turned the dial slowly, each click small but exact in the stillness. When the handle released, the safe opened with a breath of preserved air. Inside were no piles of cash, no glittering objects, nothing that belonged in a treasure story told by loud men. There were folders, water rights documents, old mineral settlement records, land parcel maps, conservation credit agreements, bank statements, and bundles of letters tied with strips of faded canvas. On top lay a thick document titled Hensley Desert Trust. Maya lifted it and began to read. Walter had owned more than the cave. He had quietly held water rights along an underground desert seep, mineral settlement funds from an old claim that had once been mismanaged, parcels around the dry wash, investment accounts, and conservation credits tied to protected desert land. Maya's voice slowed when she reached the valuation page. "Daniel," she said softly, "the trust is preliminarily valued at approximately $38 million. Daniel stared at the papers, but the number did not enter him the way he would have expected. $38 million should have felt like escape from the pickup, the gas station lights, the motel key returned with an apology, the final paycheck folded thin in his pocket. But here, in the cool dark with water tins stacked on old shelves and Rex leaning warm against his leg, the money felt less like rescue and more like a test. Maya opened the first bundle of letters. One was from a road crew worker thanking Walter for water left under canvas shade during a July road closure. Another came from a veteran who had spent 3 nights in the outer cave while waiting for a bus connection and wrote that the quiet had kept him from giving up on the morning. Another was from a family whose car had broken down beyond the dry wash, thanking Walter for canteens, crackers, and a place cool enough for the children to sleep until help arrived. Daniel read each line slowly, feeling the cave expand around him. It had not been empty. It had been humble. It had been a hidden lung in a place where heat could still breathe before pride allowed a person to ask. Rex stood and walked toward the back of the chamber, where a narrow stone basin sat under a covered pipe. He sniffed it, then looked back but did not drink. Maya followed the map in one of the folders. "There is a permitted emergency seep," she said. "Small, protected, not enough for development, but enough for a survival station if managed carefully." Daniel almost laughed at the quiet perfection of it. Cliff Mercer had called the cave useless because it could not become a resort. Walter had protected it because it could keep someone alive. Maya found Walter's final letter in the bottom of the safe, folded inside a piece of sun-faded canvas. Daniel opened it with both hands. Daniel, I knew you were sleeping in your truck before I died. I also knew you still shared water with your dog first. That told me more than any bank record. I was once a man nobody counted. This cave counted me. Used the trust to build Crescent Haven, shade shelters, emergency water, a repair station, safe trail markers, rest cabins, and a refuge for service dogs and people crossing the hardest heat of their lives. Do not make it grand. Make it reliable. Daniel lowered the letter. The chamber blurred for a moment, not from tears alone, but from the sudden weight of being seen when he had believed he had vanished. Rex pressed his shoulder into Daniel's knee, calm and certain. Maya closed the trust folder gently. You can decline stewardship, she said. Walter allowed for the trust to transfer to a desert foundation. Daniel looked at the water tins, the letters, the safe, the crescent mark, and the dog who had heard whine behind stone before any human believed the cave had a voice. I do not know how to manage $38 million, he said. Maya's eyes softened. Walter wrote that if those were your first words, I should tell you that is why he chose you. Outside, the desert sun climbed higher over Dry Mesa. Inside, the cave remained cool, patient, and alive with the memory of everyone it had quietly protected. Daniel placed one hand on Rex's head and understood that Walter had not left him a hiding place. He had left him a way to become shelter. Daniel and Maya stayed inside the cool chamber until the desert outside had climbed into full morning heat, not because there was any more shock to chase, but because the truth inside Beggar's mouth needed to be handled slowly. The safe remained open on the stone shelf, its folders stacked with careful purpose: water rights, old mineral settlement records, protected land parcels, conservation credits, bank documents, letters, maps, and Walter Hensley's final instruction for Crescent Haven. Rex sat near the narrow stone basin beneath the covered pipe, the 6-year-old German shepherd with a black and tan coat, alert ears, strong chest, and calm intelligent eyes, watching Daniel as if the dog understood that the hardest part of finding a secret was not opening it, but becoming worthy of what it asked. Daniel Brooks stood in the chamber wearing his faded field jacket over a blue work shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed brown boots, still a 40-year-old white veteran with broad shoulders, a weathered face, dark brown hair cut short with a few silver threads near his temples, but the emptiness that had followed him from the lodge and motel had begun to shift. He was still hungry. He was still tired. His pickup was still parked outside with most of his life inside it. But the cave no longer felt like the last place a man might sleep when he had nowhere else. It felt like the first place that had looked at him and asked him to stand up again. Maya opened another metal box from the shelf and found shelter logs Walter had kept for decades. They were not dramatic. They were plain, almost humble. 2 gallons water left under canvas shade, July 10th. Road crew worker rested 3 hours, gave directions to town. Old couple from Phoenix waited in cave until tow truck arrived. Veteran with service dog slept near outer wall, no questions asked. Repaired radiator hose for family at dry wash. Replaced trail marker after storm. Left crackers and canteens before heat advisory. Daniel read the entries slowly. Each line was a small resistance against the desert's cruelty, and the world's habit of not noticing people until they were already in trouble. Walter had not built a monument. He had built a habit of mercy. Maya spread the water-stained map across a crate. It showed the cave, the dry wash, a faint underground seep, the old service road, a shaded rock shelf, and 3 places marked with Walter's crescent symbol. One was the chamber. One was a buried water storage point near a mesquite stand. The third was a flat stretch above the wash labeled Future Shade Cabins, if someone honest comes after me. Daniel touched those words with one finger. Honest. The word had cost him his job. Now it had become the reason he was standing in the only cool room for miles. Maya looked over the trust documents again. Walter made the first release conditional, she said. Emergency stabilization, water testing, legal protection, and immediate living support for the steward. Daniel looked up. Living support? A modest stipend and temporary lodging funds, she said gently. He knew you might come here with nothing. Daniel looked away toward Rex. It was one thing to receive a trust for a future refuge. It was another to realize the old man had seen the exact shape of his need and made room for it without making Daniel ask. Rex rose, crossed the chamber, and leaned against Daniel's leg. Outside, a vehicle approached, tires crunching over desert gravel. Maya held up a hand for quiet and climbed with Daniel back through the passage into the outer cave. Cliff Mercer stood near the entrance with a folder under one arm, his face shaded by a white hat. He had returned with another offer, higher than the first, dressed in words like convenience, immediate relief, and development potential. He stopped when he saw Maya. Her presence changed the air faster than any argument could. Mr. Mercer, she said, calm and professional, this parcel is under trust review. No sale or negotiation will occur until legal status is confirmed. Cliff glanced at Daniel, then at Rex, then at the crescent mark on the wall. This cave is not worth the trouble. Daniel felt the old fear rise, the practical fear of unpaid bills, empty water bottles, and no bed waiting anywhere. Then he thought of Walter's note, do not make it grand. Make it reliable. Maybe that is why men like you keep missing what it is worth, Daniel said. Cliff's smile thinned, but he did not argue with Maya present. After he left, Maya drove into town to file the trust activation notice and returned with supplies, water, food, a rolled sleeping mat, 2 folding chairs, a shade tarp, and a temporary legal sign for the property entrance. Daniel tried to object to the supplies, but Maya shook her head. The first rule of a water station is that the caretaker cannot be dehydrated. By late afternoon, they had placed a sign near the rough road, Hensley Desert Trust Review in progress. No sale or transfer pending legal confirmation. Daniel set the shade tarp between the pickup and a mesquite tree. He filled Rex's bowl first, then drank a full bottle himself under Maya's approving glance. The water tasted less like charity than permission to continue. As the sun lowered, the cave mouth cooled. Red light slid across the sandstone, and the white crescent mark glowed softly above the hidden seam. Daniel carried Walter's shelter logs to the outer cave and sat with them in his lap while Rex lay beside him, head on his paws, ears still moving with every shift of wind. The entries made the cave feel inhabited by gratitude. People had rested here, survived heat here, found water here, kept going from here. Daniel had thought homelessness meant becoming invisible, but Walter had left him a place built for the invisible. Not to hide them away, but to keep them alive until they could move again. When stars began to appear over Dry Mesa, Maya stood at the cave entrance with her legal bag ready to leave. Tomorrow we start with water testing, she said. Then permits. Then temporary shade. Then the trust board. Daniel nodded, but his eyes stayed on the crescent mark. Walter said to make it reliable. Maya smiled faintly. Then reliability is the miracle. After she drove away, Daniel and Rex stayed at the mouth of Beggar's Mouth, listening to the cool air breathe through the chamber behind stone. The pickup was still his bed that night, but the darkness no longer felt like exile. It felt like a watchman's post. He had been left a cave people mocked because they could not imagine shelter without walls and a mailbox. But as Rex leaned warm against his side and the desert cooled around them, Daniel understood that some places are not empty because nothing is there. Some are empty because they have been waiting to be filled with mercy again. The first official morning of Crescent Haven began before the desert turned bright enough to punish the careless. Daniel woke in the pickup with Rex asleep across the passenger seat, the legal sign standing near the rough road, the shade tarp quiet under a thin pre-dawn wind, and Beggar's Mouth resting beneath the sandstone cliff like a dark, patient promise. His body ached from another night in the truck, but the ache had changed. It no longer belonged only to a man with nowhere to go. It belonged to a man guarding something that needed him awake. Daniel Brooks stepped down into the cool sand wearing his faded field jacket over a blue work shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed brown boots, still a 40-year-old white veteran with broad shoulders, a weathered face, dark brown hair cut short with a few silver threads near his temples, but the red dust on him no longer looked like defeat. It looked like the beginning of work. Rex jumped down after him, the 6-year-old German shepherd with a black and tan coat, alert ears, strong chest, and calm intelligent eyes, moving first to the cave entrance, then to the crescent-marked wall, then back to the water bowl as if checking the 3 essentials Walter Hensley had left behind: shelter, truth, and water. Daniel filled the bowl first, watched Rex drink, then drank from his own bottle without rationing each swallow into fear. That felt strange. Almost extravagant. By sunrise, Maya Whitaker arrived with a hydrogeologist named Dr. Elaine Porter, a desert conservation officer named Miguel Santos, and a trust accountant named Ruth Caldwell, who wore hiking boots, a sun hat, and the expression of a woman who believed numbers should serve living things, not swallow them. They brought test kits, sealed sample bottles, maps, measuring flags, clipboards, and more water than Daniel had owned in days. Maya greeted him with a quiet nod, then looked at the cave. "We start with Walter's first rule," she said. "Water before walls." Daniel almost smiled. "He wrote that?" "In 3 different places." Dr. Porter entered the cave with Rex walking ahead of her, and Daniel followed with the flashlight. Inside the hidden chamber, the air remained cool, steady, and faintly mineral. The old water tins stood along the wall like witnesses. The ledgers were stacked safely in Maya's document case. The stone basin beneath the covered pipe waited under a thin veil of dust. Dr. Porter removed the cover, tested the seep, checked the pipe, and traced the route shown on Walter's map. "Small flow," she said, "but clean enough to be promising. This cannot support development. It can support an emergency water station if protected carefully." Daniel understood the difference at once. A resort would drain it. A refuge would honor it. Miguel marked the protected zone outside the cave with blue and white flags, warning everyone where not to dig, where not to drive, and where shade structures would need to sit to avoid damaging the desert crust. Ruth Caldwell reviewed the trust budget under the shade tarp, confirming the first approved releases: water testing, temporary caretaker support, legal filing, shade stabilization, trail markers, emergency supplies, and a modest repair station. The word caretaker returned to Daniel more gently than owner. Owner sounded like possession. Caretaker sounded like staying awake for something that could not defend itself alone. Around mid-morning, Cliff Mercer's sport utility vehicle appeared again, dust rolling behind it. This time he was not alone. A man from a desert resort planning group stepped out with a rolled proposal tube and sunglasses too dark for a conversation that needed honest eyes. Maya met them before they reached the cave entrance. Daniel stayed near the tarp with Rex beside him, one hand resting on the dog's back. He could not hear every word, but he caught enough: trust review, no sale, protected seep, conservation status, legal notice. The resort man glanced toward the cave with a practiced disappointment, as if the land had failed him by refusing to become profitable. Cliff said something about Daniel being in hardship and needing practical options. Daniel felt that sentence from across the sand. It was true enough to be dangerous. Hardship did make practical options shine brighter. A quick check could buy a room, meals, clean clothes, maybe distance from the shame of sleeping in a truck. Then Rex leaned against his leg, warm and certain, and Daniel remembered Walter's letter: "Do not make it grand. Make it reliable." Maya ended the conversation without raising her voice. The men left with their proposal tube unopened. When the dust settled, Miguel looked at Daniel and said, "That will not be the last offer." Daniel nodded. "Then we make the truth easier to see before the next one comes." So they worked. They set temporary shade closer to the cave mouth but outside the protected zone. They placed sealed water containers on a raised pallet under canvas. They marked a safe footpath from the rough road to the entrance with low stones and reflective tags. Daniel repaired an old wooden crate to hold emergency supplies: electrolyte packets, canteens, bandages, dog water bowls, paper maps, and a handwritten sign that said, "Take what keeps you moving." Leave what helps the next person. Maya read it and said nothing for a moment. Then she taped a laminated version beside it. In the afternoon heat, a county road crew truck slowed near the property. One worker stepped out, sunburned and tired, and asked whether the water station was real. Daniel pointed to the shade. The man drank 2 cups, filled his bottle, and rested for 10 minutes without having to explain himself. Rex sat nearby, calm, intelligent, eyes half closed, allowing the man to scratch behind one ear before returning to the truck. It was a small thing. No ceremony. No miracle anyone would call news. But Daniel watched the road crew worker drive away steadier than he had arrived, and he understood that Crescent Haven had begun before permits, before cabins, before any official opening. It began the moment water was offered without asking a person to prove they deserved it. Near sunset, Maya handed Daniel another note from Walter's sealed packet, marked for the first day the water is shared. Daniel opened it under the shade tarp while the cliff turned orange above him. The desert will tempt you to measure success by buildings. Do not. Measure it first by the person who rests 10 minutes longer than pride would have allowed. Build slowly. Shade first. Water always. Names only if people offer them. Daniel folded the note and placed it with the shelter logs. The air cooled. The crescent mark on the cave wall glowed faintly in the last light. Rex lay at the entrance with his head on his paws, black and tan coat warmed by dusk, alert ears still listening to the stone. Daniel sat beside him, no longer counting the cave as a strange inheritance, but as a living instruction. He had been homeless when it found him. Now, before he even had a room of his own, he had helped make shade for someone else. By the end of the first week, Crescent Haven had become visible in the smallest possible ways. A shade tarp that held against the afternoon wind, a row of sealed water containers under canvas, low stones marking the safe path from the rough road to the cave entrance, blue and white flags protecting the seep zone, and a wooden crate of emergency supplies with a sign that asked people to take what kept them moving and leave what helped the next person. To anyone speeding past on the road to Dry Mesa, it still looked like a cave in a sandstone cliff. To Daniel Brooks, it looked like a promise beginning to grow bones. He woke each morning in the pickup before sunrise, still a 40-year-old white veteran with broad shoulders, a weathered face, dark brown hair cut short with a few silver threads near his temples, wearing his faded field jacket over a blue work shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed brown boots now marked by red dust, stone grit, and the clean fatigue of work that did not require a lie. Rex rose with him, the 6-year-old German shepherd with a black and tan coat, alert ears, strong chest, and calm intelligent eyes, moving first to the cave mouth, then to the crescent-marked wall, then to the water station, and finally to the shade tarp, as if checking that Walter Hensley's Old Mercy had survived the night. Maya Whitaker came each afternoon with documents, permits, trust updates, and the steady patience of someone who knew a refuge could be ruined by rushing it. Dr. Elaine Porter completed the first water tests and confirmed what Walter's maps had promised. The seep was small, clean, and fragile, useful only if protected from greed and careless weight. Miguel Santos helped Daniel mark a service trail that avoided sensitive ground and followed the natural shade of mesquite and stone. Ruth Caldwell built the first budget with plain categories Daniel could understand: water, shade, safety, caretaker support, emergency repair, service dog supplies, and slow construction. He liked that word slow. The desert respected slow. Shade moved slowly. Water gathered slowly. Trust returned slowly. On Tuesday, the first real volunteer arrived, a retired road mechanic named Luis Ortega, who had once worked on county trucks and remembered Walter leaving water at mile markers during summer heat advisories. Luis brought an old folding workbench, 2 toolboxes, and a cooler of sandwiches. He did not ask Daniel for the whole story. He simply looked at the cave, then the marked path, then Rex lying in the shade with his ears still alert. "This place needs a repair table," Luis said. "People break down out here before their vehicles do." Daniel nodded because that was exactly the kind of sentence Walter would have trusted. They set the folding bench near the shade tarp, far enough from the seep zone, close enough to help travelers without leading them into the hidden chamber. By Wednesday, a nurse from Dry Mesa brought extra electrolyte packets and asked whether she could help create heat safety cards for the supply crate. By Thursday, a woman from the gas station brought a stack of paper maps, saying she was tired of seeing people trust their phones until signal disappeared beyond the dry wash. By Friday, the same county road crew worker who had rested there on the first day returned with 2 reflective trail markers and a quiet thank you he seemed embarrassed to offer. Daniel accepted all of it carefully, the way a hungry man learns not to bite into kindness too fast. Rex accepted it more naturally. He moved among the visitors with calm authority, stopping beside tired hands, standing near water bowls, and lying at the cave entrance whenever the wind behind stone began to breathe cooler air into the outer chamber. The hidden room remained protected under Maya's legal seal, its safe contents catalogued, its letters copied, its water tins preserved. Daniel went inside only with Maya, Ruth, or Dr. Porter, and each time he stepped into the cool chamber, he felt the same humbling truth: Walter had not left him a secret to own. He had left him a responsibility to translate into shade, water, and repair. On Saturday afternoon, Cliff Mercer returned again, this time without the resort man. He stood near the legal sign with dust on his shoes and watched a tired delivery driver rest under the tarp while Louise tightened a loose battery cable at the folding bench. Daniel expected another offer, another warning about liability, another smooth sentence about wasted potential. Instead, Cliff looked toward the crescent mark inside the cave and said, "Walter used to leave canteens at my father's cattle gate." Daniel said nothing. Cliff shifted his hat in his hands. "I did not know this was where they came from." For a moment, he looked less like a broker and more like a man standing beside a memory he had priced too low. Daniel thought of Walter's note about not making the cave grand. He thought of Maya saying reliability was the miracle. Then he pointed toward the supply crate. "We need more shade stakes before the wind picks up." Cliff blinked, then nodded. "I have some in my truck." It was not an apology. It was better than one for now. It was work. Near sunset, after the others had gone, Daniel found another shelter log entry in Walter's copied pages. "A man will accept water sooner than mercy. Give him water first. Let mercy remain unnamed until he has strength enough to recognize it." Daniel read the line aloud while Rex lay beside him, black and tan coat warm in the low light, calm intelligent eyes half closed but ears still listening. The desert stretched wide and red beyond the cave. The old pickup was still Daniel's bed, though Maya had arranged temporary lodging funds he had not yet brought himself to use. The habit of scarcity did not leave a man in a week. But something had changed. People were coming to the cave not to laugh, not to buy, not to measure what could be taken, but to add small useful things to what Walter had begun. Daniel looked at the water station, the repair table, the marked trail, the protected flags, and the white crescent glowing softly on the sandstone wall. He had once believed homelessness meant having no place to return to at night. Now he understood another kind of home beginning around him, a place where someone checked the water before the heat rose, where a dog listened to the stone, where a stranger could sit in the shade without explaining how close they had come to giving up. Rex lifted his head and leaned against Daniel's knee. The cool air moved from the hidden chamber, soft as breath. Some shelters are built with lumber. Some begin with a bowl of water, a patch of shade, and one faithful creature refusing to let a forgotten place stay silent. By the third week, Crescent Haven had become less a secret in the desert and more a rhythm people began to trust. At sunrise, the sandstone cliff still glowed red above Beggar's Mouth, the dry wash still carried only dust and memory, the mesquite trees still threw thin shade across the ground, and the white crescent mineral mark still shone quietly on the cave wall where Rex had first heard the wind behind stone. But now there were stronger shade structures set on raised footings outside the protected seep zone, water tanks resting under canvas, reflective trail markers leading safely from the rough road, a small repair station with a workbench Luis Ortega had built from reclaimed lumber, and a lot supply cabinet stocked with maps, electrolyte packets, dog bowls, bandages, flashlights, canteens, and handwritten cards explaining heat safety in plain language. Daniel Brooks woke each morning in the pickup, though Maya Whitaker had finally convinced him to accept a small caretaker cabin trailer placed beyond the wash. He still preferred the truck some nights, not because he had to, but because old fear did not disappear just because paperwork said help was allowed. He remained a 40-year-old white veteran with broad shoulders, a weathered face, dark brown hair cut short with a few silver threads near his temples, wearing his faded field jacket over a blue work shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed brown boots marked by red dust, stone grit, and the honest wear of work that turned survival into service. Rex moved beside him before the sun grew harsh, the 6-year-old German shepherd with a black and tan coat, alert ears, strong chest, and calm intelligent eyes, checking the cave mouth, the crescent wall, the water station, the repair bench, and the trail markers as if each one belonged to a quiet patrol of mercy. Maya kept the Hensley Desert Trust steady through legal review. Ruth Caldwell kept the accounts clear and careful. Dr. Elaine Porter returned twice a week to test the seep and remind everyone that small water was still sacred water. Miguel Santos trained volunteers to walk only on marked paths so the fragile desert crust would not be crushed by good intentions. By then, the town of Dry Mesa had heard enough to stop laughing at Walter Hensley's cave. They did not all understand it. Some came curious, some came ashamed, some came because they remembered a canteen left under a tarp or a ride arranged when heat had emptied the road of kindness. Daniel did not demand confession from any of them. He had learned from Walter's logs that mercy worked best when it did not make a person stand under a spotlight to receive it. On Monday, a church group brought sealed food packs. On Tuesday, the gas station owner installed a notice board listing safe travel times, water points, and emergency numbers. On Wednesday, Cliff Mercer returned with a truckload of shade stakes and helped Louise secure the repair awning before the afternoon wind rose. Cliff worked quietly, wiped dust from his face, and finally said, "I kept calling it empty because I did not know how to sell what it actually was." Daniel tightened a rope knot and looked toward the cave. "Maybe some things are supposed to stop being for sale once you understand them." Cliff nodded and did not argue. The biggest test came on Thursday, when the weather shifted hard and hot, sending a shimmer over the road by mid-morning. A family in an old van pulled in with the hood steaming lightly and 2 children silent in the back seat, tired from heat and worry. Louise handled the engine. The nurse from town guided them under the shade. Daniel filled cups without asking questions, and Rex lay near the children with his head on his paws, calm intelligent eyes soft enough that the younger one reached out and touched his black and tan coat with one finger. No one made the moment dramatic. The van needed a hose clamp, water, and time. The family needed shade, quiet, and the relief of not being treated like a problem. After they left, the mother pressed a folded dollar into the supply box even though Daniel told her she did not need to. "For the next person," she said. Walter had written nearly the same words decades earlier, and Daniel felt the circle close without making a sound. That evening, Maya brought copies of the first approved plan for Crescent Haven, permanent shade cabins, a solar pump, protected water storage, a service dog rest area, a small repair workshop, marked desert trails, and an archive inside the hidden chamber where Walter's letters and logs would be preserved. Daniel looked at the drawings under the shade tarp while the red cliff cooled in the lowering sun. They were modest, practical, almost plain. He liked them for that. Grand things drew applause. Reliable things saved people who had no strength left for applause. Rex sat beside the table, ears lifted toward the cave, as the cool air began to breathe out through the crescent wall. Maya handed Daniel another note from Walter's sealed packet, marked for the day the first stranger leaves stronger than they arrived. Daniel opened it slowly. "The desert will tell you a secret if you stay long enough. People do not always need to be rescued loudly. Sometimes they only need water without judgment, shade without questions, and someone close enough to notice when the road has taken too much from them. Keep the cave cool. Keep the work honest. Let the dog greet them first." Daniel folded the note and placed it with the shelter logs. The words sat in him gently. A month earlier, he had been a fired maintenance man sleeping behind a gas station, measuring water by fear. Now he was still learning how to accept a bed, still waking some nights as if the world might ask him to leave, still carrying the ache of being dismissed for telling the truth. But every day, someone arrived at the cave and left with more strength than they had brought. That had begun to teach him a new kind of home. Not a place that belonged to him alone, but a place where his presence helped others keep going. After sunset, when the volunteers left and the desert settled into purple shadow, Daniel walked with Rex to the cave entrance. The white crescent mark glowed faintly in the last light. The water tank stood full. The repair bench was covered. The trail markers reflected his flashlight and a soft line toward the road. Rex leaned against his leg, warm and steady. Daniel placed one hand on the dog's head and listened to the hidden chamber breathing through stone. The town had been shocked by what Rex found behind the wall, but the true secret was still unfolding in plain sight. A deserted cave could become a refuge when the right heart stopped long enough to hear it. By late summer, Crescent Haven no longer looked like a forgotten cave unless someone chose not to see what had grown around it. The sandstone cliff still rose red and quiet above Beggar's Mouth. The white crescent mineral mark still rested on the inner wall where Rex had first heard the wind breathing behind stone, and the dry wash still carried more memory than water most days. But now the rough road was marked with low reflectors that caught headlights before travelers missed the turn. The water tank stood beneath reinforced shade, clean and full, tested on schedule and protected from waste. 3 small shade cabins sat beyond the wash on raised platforms, plain and sturdy, their walls built to stay cool without pretending to be anything grand. A solar pump hummed softly in the morning light, careful and measured, drawing only what Dr. Elaine Porter allowed from the protected seep. The repair station had become a real workshop with a covered bench, hand tools, spare hoses, clamps, tire gauges, trail maps, dog bowls, and a sign painted by the nurse from Dry Mesa, "Rest first. Decide later." Daniel Brooks opened the station before sunrise each day, still a 40-year-old white veteran with broad shoulders, a weathered face, dark brown hair cut short with a few silver threads near his temples, wearing his faded field jacket over a blue work shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed brown boots now marked by red dust, stone grit, water stains, and the honest wear of work that gave back more than it took. Rex entered first, the 6-year-old German shepherd with a black and tan coat, alert ears, strong chest, and calm intelligent eyes, moving from the cave mouth to the water station, from the crescent wall to the repair bench, from the marked trail to the service dog rest area, as if the whole desert refuge depended on someone quiet enough to notice what had shifted overnight. Maya Whitaker kept the Hensley Desert Trust protected with clear documents and cleaner boundaries. Ruth Caldwell kept the accounts exact and humble. Miguel Santos trained volunteers to respect the fragile desert crust, and Luis Ortega ran the repair bench with the calm authority of a man who knew a loose clamp could become a long walk if ignored. Cliff Mercer came twice a week now, not as a broker, but as the man who hauled shade stakes, patched canvas, and sometimes stood near the legal sign looking embarrassed by how close he had come to selling away the one place that had once helped his own family. Dry Mesa had changed too, though slowly, because towns did not become honest all at once. The gas station kept a Crescent Haven map by the register. The clinic donated heat safety cards. A church group restocked shelf-stable food packs. Road crews radioed when they saw stranded travelers. Veterans passing through learned they could sit in the shade without being questioned. Families with tired children learned there was water, maps, and a dog gentle enough to make fear loosen its grip. On the first dedication morning, Daniel wanted no stage, no banner, and no speeches that turned Walter Hensley into a legend too polished to be true. Maya convinced him that some words were not decoration, but record. So they gathered under the largest shade structure while the sandstone cliff glowed gold behind them. Volunteers, road workers, clinic staff, the gas station owner, travelers who had once stopped for water and returned with supplies, and a few people who had known Walter only as a strange old man who kept to himself. The hidden chamber remained closed to the public, but its archive had been catalogued, and copies of selected shelter logs rested in a glass case near the cave entrance. Daniel stood beside it with Rex at his left leg. He placed one hand on the case and looked at the first open page. Water left before heat advisory, canvas shade repaired, road worker rested, veteran with service dog slept 3 nights, family waited in cave until tow arrived. Plain words. Holy words, though Walter would have disliked hearing them called that. Daniel looked out at the faces beneath the shade. Walter did not leave this cave so people would admire him, he said. He left it because the desert gets dangerous when people are too proud, too tired, or too unseen to ask for help in time. He knew water should not wait for a perfect story. Shade should not require an explanation. And a person who is worn down should not have to prove they deserve 10 quiet minutes to breathe. The group stayed still. Even the wind seemed to soften along the cliff. Daniel felt Rex lean against him, warm and steady. When I came here, I had lost my job for telling the truth. I was sleeping in my truck. I almost sold this place because I could only see my own need. Rex heard what I could not. He heard the space behind the stone. Walter trusted that if the cave opened, I would understand what it meant to be without shelter, and what it meant to offer it without shame. He stopped there, because the desert did not need more words. Afterward, people moved naturally into the work. Louise showed a young volunteer how to check a battery terminal. The nurse refilled the heat safety cards. Miguel walked a small group along the marked trail and explained where not to step. Cliff tightened the corner of a shade sail without being asked. A veteran traveling with a service dog sat near the cave mouth with a cup of water and said nothing for nearly half an hour, and no one disturbed him. Near sunset, when the visitors had gone and the first lamps glowed softly inside the shade cabins, Daniel walked with Rex to the crescent wall. The cool air from the hidden chamber breathed through the seam just enough to touch his face. He thought of the pickup behind the gas station, the motel key returned, the report he refused to sign, the broker's quick offer, the tin box, the token, the safe, and Walter's letter. He had arrived with almost nothing, but almost nothing had made him able to recognize the value of shade. Rex lay at the cave entrance, black and tan coat warm in the amber light, alert ears finally relaxed, calm intelligent eyes watching the road where the reflectors waited for the next person who might need them. Daniel sat beside him and listened. Desert wind, quiet water, canvas moving, tools settling, the soft breath of a cave no longer empty. Sometimes a man loses the roof over his head so he can understand shelter from the ground up. Sometimes a dog hears mercy before a broken heart can believe it is still meant for him. And sometimes the place everyone calls useless becomes the first place someone survives the hardest heat of their life.